Hey, Dia Sebastian, how the hell are you?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm excellent, man. It's good to see you.
Cool.
I think the last time I saw you in person, well, at one of your shows, it was probably '93,
Yeah,
maybe
that's yep, yep,
'94, somewhere in
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's been quite some time, some time.
Definitely.
But for people who don't know who you are, um, how about a little bit of background in like who you are and what you do and all that
Yeah,
good
yeah.
stuff?
Well, I started off. I'm a musician. I mean, primarily started off, God, playing when I was in grade school and did all that stuff. Later on, when I was 16, I decided I wanted to. That was it. I was going to be a musician. I saw Gary Newman. Maybe when I was 17, I
Perfect.
bought a bass when I was 16. Started a punk rock band called Zyj, and then I saw Gary Newman on Saturday Night Live, and that was kind of like a turning point for me. I was like, okay, this is cool. This is what I really want to do. And at that point, I decided I wanted to be a musician.
Hmm.
And I'm 58 now, so I've been doing it
Hmm.
for that many years. But yeah, I did. Zyde was a little punk band in San Bernardino, California, and then I joined a Latin avant-garde band playing keyboards. And in that band, it was called Freaks of More. We got to play with some bigger bands like. There was a band called Bone Cabal that was pretty big around here at the time, was playing a lot in LA, and quite a few other bands. Community FK, who was actually a pretty big industrial band at the time. And then joined a
Yeah.
band called
Yeah.
Montage as a singer because I ran into hard times, had to sell all my stuff. And that was weird singing in a band. That was kind of like a U2 type of thing. And in that band, we put out an EP and
Mhm.
charted on CMJ. That was around 1984. And it did it kind of opened my eyes to what the possibilities were. The problem was my drinking was out of control. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and
Mhm.
I kept wrecking shows. We've had big shows at Gazzari's and Madame Wong's, and I'd go up all drunk and like a bad Jim Morrison, kind of night, and wreck things. And
Right.
yeah, so then I decided I got married. That didn't work out. Decided I was going to go to the East Coast. I wanted to go to New York. I was going to go to New York where all the cool electronic music. We called it dance industrial back then. That was back like,
Right.
probably 85, 86. Um, and so I also had another project called A Side by Side that did some cassettes, but that didn't go anywhere. So anyway, I moved back east and I got real, it was just really cool seeing what was going on in DC because I was living right outside of DC in the Maryland, Waldorf,
Mhm.
Maryland was where I was living. And I used to go do sound at a place called DC Space and the 930 Club. I'd check those, see bands there. I saw Clan of Zymox there and a whole bunch of other cool bands. And I thought, wow, I
Nice.
mean, it was a lot different than LA at the time when I had left the LA area where San Bernardino's by Los Angeles. When I left that area, it was like it was all hair bands, and
Mhm.
I couldn't dig it at all. I mean, it was just like I can't do this. On the East Coast, there was a lot more of an industrial scene, and it seemed like that's kind of what I was really into. Um, Bopped around there for a while,
Mhm.
went down to Atlanta, Georgia for a while. That didn't work out either. Went back to San Bernardino, and then I decided I was going to move up to Seattle. My dad, he was living in Lacey, and he said, "Come on up here," and I did, and that didn't work out. Me and him were fighting. So I lived under a bridge for a couple of weeks in my truck, and eventually got enough money to get a small apartment, the Cambridge, down on First Hill, and I got sober, and then I
Mhm.
started Kill Switch Klick, which is probably my most known project. Uh, recorded a demo. I had a lot of nervous energy when I was sober. I mean, because I was so used to drinking and being drunk all the time that when I stopped drinking,
Sure.
I got really, really, I don't know, I just had all this nervous energy. So I built this
Mhm.
thing called a slam bar, which is like a big lap steel, and did that, and then essentially wrote a demo. Got a guy Mike Ditmore to help me bring the thing live, and that's what we did. So Kill Switch Klick kind of became the thing. I guess we got signed to Cleopatra Records, and we helped some other bands who also helped us. We did a thing called the NEC, which was the Northwest
Mhm.
Electro-Industrial Coalition, and that was a whole bunch of bands at the
Mhm.
time that were unsigned. And yeah, you know a lot about those, about the NEC too. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
Did a TV show and made a couple movies, and now here I am back down in San Bernardino, California. So for a while, I'm going to be back up in Seattle soon, I hope.
Oh, fun. Yeah. I mean,
I'm
same reason there
just
is
talking, man.
interesting.
Let me talk. Hey, I'm just gonna keep talking on. No,
Yeah.
just kidding. That was like this the brief, yeah, my music life in a nutshell, basically.
But hey,
So
when people ask me what I do the same thing. It's like,
yeah, so,
yeah,
here it is.
how do you combine 40 years,
Yeah,
into like five
exactly.
minutes?
Right, exactly,
Um,
exactly.
but you brought up a couple of great jumping off points, right? So the first one
Okay,
though is Freak Some More, which I
right.
didn't know about until I like 2 days ago when I looked into it.
Yeah,
But it says, at least according to Wikipedia, you were actually also the trombonist, which is
yeah. I
very
played
interesting to
trombone
me.
and keyboards. Yeah, trombone and keyboards. I in elementary school I played trombone. That's what I did, and
Hmm.
the good thing about that was it gave me breath control, and I didn't want to play the trombone.
Hmm.
My mom's boyfriend had one at the time, and they're like, "Here, you play this." I say, "I want to play snare drum." They're like, "No, you're going to play the trombone. We got a trombone. You're going to play the trombone." So I did, but in hindsight, it was really cool because it like gave me breath control. So when I later went on to go learn how to sing and did other stuff, I had that breath control. But yeah, I played trombone for them and keyboards and a little bit of bass. Yeah, in Freaks More.
Wow. Um, so it's quite the stretch to go from that, like a Latin inspired band, to Kill
Right.
Switch Klick, which is obviously
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
although one thing that I found very fascinating about, especially early Kill Switch Klick stuff, is there was a lot of like jazzy sort of rhythms happening,
Yeah. There's
below
a
the
lot of
surface.
I tried to yeah I tried a lot of experimentation. I didn't want to be I don't know. I mean, I guess in some way it kind of convoluted the sound. It wasn't as direct as like Nitzerev or Nine Inch Nails or something who had a definite sound. I was kind of all over the place, and
Hmm.
I really like to incorporate whatever I wanted to. I think of myself more as a composer, I guess, and I like to experiment. And
Yeah,
when you're not beholden to a label, you can do whatever you want, and that's what I did.
yeah,
But eventually, I
absolutely.
got signed to
I mean,
Cleopatra, and then I deal with those pressures. But
so
yeah,
this is a great jumping off point to talk about Organica,
yep,
because people either
yep,
really loved that or hated it. Like there was
right,
no in between. Like, oh, this
right,
is a
right, right.
decent album. It was like, this sucks or this is great.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
actually loved it because
Well, thank
there's
you.
something about quasi industrial music that is acoustic, right? Like it's a really
Right, right.
fascinating, style.
Exactly, exactly.
Um, and that was basically the last. Well, then I think I'm wrong, but that was basically the last album you guys put out, right?
Yeah, and then there was a couple
Organica.
best of. I did some work with Martin Atkins of Invisible. They put out
Hmm.
uh, Almost Ambient, which was a weird collection of stuff. But really, I mean, Kill Switch Klick had
Hmm.
kind of wind down. I mean, if you really think about it, there was only two albums. There was, I mean, there was more than that, but I mean, the two main albums were Degenerate and Beat It to Fit, Paint It to Match. The two albums after
Hmm.
those two, Alt and what was the other one? Oddities and Versions were both. They had a lot of remixes of those two albums. Organic had a lot of the other stuff
Hmm.
reimagined as acoustic, and then some extra stuff. Um, and then, I mean, yeah, I kind of recycled some of the songs. It's mostly because I started my own label, the Go Custom Records, and I wanted to get
Hmm.
some stuff out on that. And we stopped playing live in '97. I mean, I had a nervous breakdown, and
Hmm.
when I came back from tour in '97, it wasn't a complete nervous breakdown. It was just like massive anxiety. We just had gone out on the road.
Hmm.
The van blew up, which was good because we got a cover mention, and I got my tour diary printed in the Rocket, which was the old newspaper in Seattle. That was kind of like the big
Hmm.
music paper. But I had just had my baby daughter had been born, and I was kind of torn between am I going to be like the father or am I going to be going out on the road again? And
Hmm.
my ex-wife, she's now my ex-wife, but at the time it was like the family thing was really pushing me. Like I had to make that kind of decision to stay home. And
Right.
I really thought at a certain point we were going to get signed to Sony. Sony had shown a lot of interest in us right after the Degenerate
Mm.
album. They came and saw us in New York, and nothing came of it. So I kind of went into a depression, anxiety thing in '97, and just kind of shut the whole thing down. and concentrated on the record label and learning how to film things. So
That's really interesting.
yeah,
Let's back up into the NEC, because
yeah,
that was always really fascinating to me.
right,
It was kind of the first, at least that I can think of, sort of coalition around bands that happened in
yeah,
Seattle,
yeah.
right? And Seattle
Around the
was
United
not
States,
known
we were the first.
as yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah, not at all.
Seattle is
Yeah,
not known for being a gothic industrial sort of town, right?
yeah,
I mean, there were several
right,
bands around, but
right.
outside of going to the Vogue, that was
Yeah,
pretty much the only place where they would play that stuff.
yeah.
Um, so let's talk about how that started. Like you, um,
It was a
if
couple.
I read it
Oh, yeah, go
right,
ahead.
I'm sorry, if I read it right, basically it was either you or somebody from Man Christ Wept. One of the two of you like
Mhm.
communicated with the other, and that's basically kind of how it started.
Right. It was one of the guys from Antichrist Wept. I believe it was Robert and Chris, actually, both the guys from Antichrist Wept got in on it. And
Hmm.
the initial conversation, and Drew from Noisebox. Yeah, no, who was it? Drew, or was it?
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the guys from Noisebox. And me and a couple of the guys from Antichrist Wept were talking about getting shows together, and I thought maybe we should have some meetings. And I talked to Drew and those guys over in no, who is it? It was who are the guys from Noisebox? Sorry, it's been so long. Yeah, I think it was Drew. Anyhow, we talked about it. We all bounced the ideas between each other. We talked to SMP. They were down. I knew SMP because
Hmm.
Jason had actually. Me and him had talked about doing a band together. He actually was talking about getting into Kill Switch Klick at a certain point, but it ended up not happening. He
Oh
started his
wow.
own band, which was phenomenal. I love SMP; those guys are great. But
Hmm.
yeah, so it was like we all started talking, and we thought, okay, we'll have meetings, and we'll see if we can kind of work out a way to have shows together. And because we were such a minority as far as a genre goes, and it was hard to get shows, you'd go play a show, and it would be like, oh, that's that industrial weird band. Who are we going to put them with? And that's what promoters would say. We decided to make like a
Right.
package. So it's like, okay, these bands, they all kind of similar. Give us a night, a
Hmm.
Thursday night, some kind of whacked out night. We'll take it. And that's how it kind of started. And it grew from there. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
mean, the roster, especially thinking back now, like it was an incredible
yeah,
roster of bands that were part of that.
yeah,
Um,
yep,
most of which I'm pretty sure don't exist anymore. At least the ones
yeah.
that I know of
Well,
don't
SMP,
exist anymore.
Jason, I saw Jason from SMP is playing with Frontline Assembly. He was playing drums with them for a while, and he's still releasing music.
Hmm.
I don't know about Noisebox. And Christ Wept. Robert went on to do Falk Wolf and a couple other projects. Einer asked, he was doing
Hmm.
a whole bunch of stuff. He was just a phenomenal guy, inventing stuff, and oh my god. But the thing was, inspiration wise, you felt like you had a group. You know what I mean? And not only could we
Hmm.
promote shows together, we could also sit down and say, okay, let's uh, work on other things, promotions and things like that. And I was really good at the promotional aspect of it. So I was sending out all these packages, hey, there's something else going on besides grunge in Seattle. And it actually helped a lot, helped all of us, I think. Hopefully. I mean, some of the bands kind of dissolved before, and we had a couple bad incidents, just personal things within bands, had nothing to do with the NEC. That made me kind of
Hmm.
sad, bands that broke up for weird reasons and stuff. But yeah, overall, it was a great experience.
Yeah. Again, it kind of set the stage for um, other sort of institutions like that. Not just in
Yeah,
Seattle, but
yeah,
all over the place. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and I always thought that was really incredible because, again, Seattle is not known for that type of music, right?
exactly.
Um, and they
Yeah.
could have been, and probably should have
Well,
been.
it's the reason that I
But
came to Seattle. My dad was like, okay, come up to Seattle. Well, he said, come up to Lacey. I'm right there, not too far from Seattle. I'm like, what the hell's in Seattle? This was like 1989, and
mm,
then I realized Network Records was right up in Vancouver. And I love Skinny Puppy and Moab and all those bands. Manufacture, love
hmm.
Manufacture. They were one of the earlier Network bands. Had all the Network Records compilations, and I mean, besides 4AD, Network was one of my favorite or record labels. And so I'm thinking, wow,
Hmm.
I'm only like 2.5 hours from there. So I moved up there, and then which it was really magical. Then I can't really explain it. it was just a whole crazy bohemian coffee vibe thing going on with poets, and it was really cool, but very creative and very isolated. Then the explosion, the grunge thing happened, and everybody started coming there. But whatever. But for me, being there, that's how I got signed to a label in LA. Was in Seattle, and it's like, oh, you're one of those industrial bands in Seattle. Okay, we'll check you out. And so it actually worked to my benefit that way too. But yeah.
So what about like touring? So let me back up just a second. So I think I saw KSK, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, maybe more than that.
Oh, wow, cool.
You guys didn't play super awesome. Or awesome, I'm sorry, often. Freudian slip there.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
played awesome, just not often.
We try. Not every show is awesome, that's for sure, but yeah.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that because I don't really remember that well. But there was, you kind of hit on it. Like there was a different way of looking at music back then that doesn't necessarily exist right now, right? I think people were just excited to go see a live band,
Right.
And I don't think that excitement is there anymore because everyone expects way more production and polish and the auto tune and all that sort of bullshit, right? Whereas back then it was just like, hey, somebody's out there, they're singing their heart out, they're playing their heart out, like this is awesome.
Right.
There
was a lot more technology on stage than there was, I mean, you see bands
absolutely.
now with a singer who has, auto tune in their pedal setup, it's pretty crazy, but
yeah. There's certain bands that can kind of get away with it, like you mentioned, like Nazareb, and while they do play a fair amount of what they do live, there's still a lot of recording, happening behind the scenes, but they somehow pull it off, right? Or like Skinny Puppy, where you're lucky if a quarter of the sounds that you hear are actually really being played live.
Yeah, for sure.
So it takes a certain sort of band to pull that off.
Well, we would have synthesizer tracks and stuff.
Sure.
We had some synth tracks in the background, but we had all live drums. Yeah, all live drums, and then I play the slam bar, live bass, all that stuff going on. So, and you take chances because occasionally we'd fuck up, and you just like have to recover. And but we got tight. I mean, Mike, my drummer, Mike Ditmore, was just like phenomenal. He'd just lock in. We used to call him the human drum machine because he would lock into the stuff that I had recorded, and it was like in the drum machines playing, and then he'd just add all these layers and stuff to it. He'd be triggering samples and playing stuff, and it was really, really intense. He really added a bigger sound, you know what I mean, live. And his drums, he eventually got a drum deal with Boom Theory, which is Al Adinolfi's company. They do kind of these crossover drums that are like regular drums, but they have triggers in them. So he could actually trigger the sounds, of whatever sampler or whatever. He had like a S330 rack mount sampler, and then actually have live acoustic sounds too. So it was it created this huge, huge drum sound, which was a big part of what we did. And when Mike quit the band, because he was working at Boeing and they had offered him some promotions and stuff, and he had to do it, it really took away from that. And that kind of was part of the reason that I decided not to play live anymore, is just because we had 3 or 4 fill-in drummers, and all of them were good guys, but they weren't Mike. It wasn't Mike.
So, it's hard when you've got an integral part of the band and suddenly you don't have that. It's really hard to continue.
Exactly.
But you brought something up that is interesting to me, because I have this vague recollection of a band, and it might have been Noisebox. I think it was Noisebox, but it could have been you guys. That they had these little bobble like things that they would throw in the audience, and like when they were hit with a laser.
That wasn't us. I think it was Noisebox. Yeah.
It was absolutely incredible, because the audience would basically trigger all the samples, in their synths.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool.
I believe that was a Noisebox. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Noisebox.
Yeah.
I mean, it was chaos, but of course, when you're in your 20s, you're like, well, fuck, this is awesome. Like. Yeah. So timing. Let's talk about that just a little bit. So the timing of all that stuff, like NEC and as all these bands are coming out, Obviously, the timing wasn't ideal given the whole quote grunge explosion, that happened shortly thereafter. Or
right,
I guess it was happening during, but exploded about the same time that you guys were really
right.
beginning to,
Yeah,
pick up steam
yeah,
and whatnot. Did you
yeah.
ever play with any of those bands?
No, I mean, I met Mike McCready at a party, the guitar player
Mm-hmm.
for Pearl Jam. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
super nice guy, super humble guy.
Yeah,
Um,
very much.
Eddie Vedder, I did poetry slam where I sucked. I was so bad. I had a poetry chap out that I put out early on, and
Mm-hmm.
because I used to write a lot of poetry, which stuff that didn't end up as lyrics, and I put this little poetry
Mm-hmm.
chap out, and I got asked to do a poetry slam at the Weathered Wall, and
Mm-hmm.
these guys were like super heavy hitters. I mean, these guys, the poets were amazing, and I got up there with my little book, and I was like not used to I was used to having all my music, which is activates me. Instead I'm like read my stupid little poetry book and
Right.
uh, whatever. Anyhow, but I guess Eddie Vedder, the guy at the table who was doing the sales, walked up and bought a couple of my books just to be nice, I guess, or whatever. So I thought that was kind of cool. But
Nice.
yeah, I don't. I never played with any of those bands. I mean, it's just like they were kind of in a whole different circle than we were. You know what I mean? And we were
Mm-hmm.
like a smaller circle. Their circle expanded, and then they all went out and went on
Mm-hmm.
tour and did bigger things, than we did. But I don't know. It was still though. It kind of there was a lot of people who really accepted what we were doing, even from the grunge thing, because there was a lot of bands like Sky Cries Mary and
Right.
Tachung or Tachung, however you say it, that
Chacon.
were
Yeah, love them.
also kind of Tachung. They were kind of like in between. You know what I mean? There's like Sky
Mm-hmm.
Cries Mary does something a little bit different. More psychedelic. And then there was like Faith and Disease, who I actually collaborated with them. We did a song for MTV's The Real World. It
Mm-hmm.
was actually the 9/11 episode, and I did that with Faith and Disease. Dara, their singer, came over, and Eric, the bass player, came over to my studio. We did some stuff, and then I sampled some stuff, and I did some remixes for them later. Did some remixes for Diamond Fist Warney, who was also
Mm-hmm.
a really cool band. And I mean, you really can't describe some. I mean, Faith and Disease was ethereal, kind of ambient, gothic,
Mm-hmm.
but they also had a Mazzy Star thing going on, and so they were kind of
Yep.
in between a lot of genres. But I don't know. That was kind of. I think Seattle was really creative at that time, and it was actually, regardless of the fact that um, a lot of the bands kind of faded away. I think for all of us, it was a good time to be there. You know what I mean? And
Definitely.
people were a lot more accepting, I think, of different styles. So, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It's funny. I actually worked with Dara at a little bakery in Edmonds in like 92 or
Yeah,
93, somewhere in there. Um,
yeah,
and it was always
yeah.
funny. It was
She's
like,
awesome.
yeah, totally. But she was so, especially back then, because Faith and Disease was just starting, and she was super shy, right? And it was like, how are you going to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
on
yeah,
stage? Like, but then I saw her live and I was like, wow, I mean,
yeah.
she's really powerful.
Different person. Yeah,
Yeah,
yep,
totally different
yep.
person.
She has a great voice
Completely.
too. Well, I had it when I had them come over to the studio. I just said, just scat for just do whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And Eric played this little bass line that he did, and I like sampled those and looped them together, and then I chopped up all her little vocal parts. Well, actually, it's a big vocal part. Chopped it all up
Mm-hmm.
and put it all together, and then basically that's how this song. It was called Eventually. It
Mm-hmm.
was on my album and on one of their albums as well. Yeah,
That's
and then on
incredible.
MTV. So
It's awesome. My
didn't get
favorite
any money
Faith and
for it,
Disease,
but it was nice exposure.
right? That's generally the way shit like that
Yeah,
works. um,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, my favorite Faith and Disease story. He probably wasn't around by the time you did that, but Rick, who was one of their drummers, Rick West,
Yeah,
I think, whatever.
yeah,
I knew
yeah. I
his
remember
sister
him.
really well, and I think I worked with him at some point too. But I
Yeah.
was just starting to do a lot of LSD at the time, and was over at his house, and we did like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it, in the double digits of hits a piece. Like, I mean, we were super
Oh my
super high,
god.
and
Okay. Yeah.
this is probably about
Yeah.
93, 92, 93, somewhere in there. And
Yeah.
he was like, "Oh, I gotta leave for a little bit. You just stay here." Right? I was like, "Okay, fine." He's like, "I'm just gonna put some music on you. You'll be fine." Right? I was like, "Okay, cool." So he leaves,
Yeah.
and about 20 minutes later, I'd melted, like completely melted, and I ended up walking
Oh no.
like 2.5 miles home, stopped at a grocery store, got true fucking story, 3 carts of groceries and pushed them up to the counter.
Oh
And
my
when I got to
god.
the counter, I suddenly had this moment of
Yeah.
clarity. I was like, first of all, I don't need these. Second of all, I don't have the money to pay for them. So, you know,
Yeah,
here's
exactly.
this kid like, whacked out of
Where's
his
the exit?
mind. Yeah, exactly. And it's a small town, so everybody knew who I was. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll be back. You know. Anyway, that's my Rick story. So you,
That's cool.
kind of, it's both embarrassing, but now it's been long enough that it's funny. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so when you got into your production stuff, what
Right.
what kind of got you into that? I mean, because was it like something to add on top of the outlet that you had with Kill Switch Klick, or was it something you always wanted to do, or like what pushed you into doing like production
The
stuff like
thing
that?
about I'd been in doing studio stuff since the 80s, and I had met a lot of cool bands that I thought, oh, that'd be cool to record. I think the first band I did was Antichrist Wept. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I did SMP's first demo, and then they re-recorded a better version of it. But Antichrist Wept, I was talking to Robert, and Robert was like, "We can never go into the studio." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "We need like 10,000 tracks and da 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 da." I'm like, "No, you don't. I mean, I got this 24 channel mixer. Let's just mix it down and get you something. I mean, you got to get
Mm-hmm.
something out there. People need to hear your music." He's like, "Oh, it won't." He was such a perfectionist. He didn't want to do it. And Chris kind of talked to him, who's the singer, and he's like, "We got to do this." And so they came over to my studio and we started recording. And at that point, I had a really shit. I mean, I had like a sampler. I had really shit setup. I mean, a sampler and a couple of the little things,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a nice mixing board. But I mean, I was recording everything down to VHS tape. So we did the whole session. We got everything sounded really good. We dumped it all down to that tape, and they sent it off to Germany, and they got a record deal. They got signed to Buzz Records in Germany. So it was like, see there, I mean, if you just take the initiative to record the best you can, it doesn't have to be like this thing. What I mean? Just get it out there. Not everybody's going to have the budget like that Trent Reznor did on his first album, or a lot of these
Right.
other bands. Um, so you do what you can, and with them it worked. It worked to their advantage. And then other people said, "Hey, I'd like to record with you," and I'm like, "Okay." So I bought more equipment, and then later when I started Go Custom Records, I kind of got into like a rockabilly psychobilly phase because it kind of
Mm-hmm.
went along with the movies that I was making at the time and my TV show. So I met all these bands, especially when we were out in the field recording shows and stuff. And they're like, "Hey, can you record with us?" So I did Drag Strip Riot's half of their demo, or half of their first CD. The half of it they recorded at Microsoft in this huge multi-million-dollar studio, and then the other half they recorded in my little crappy studio. But we were able to through mastering get the tracks pretty close. And then I released that on my label and a whole bunch of other bands that I worked with and knew, and did a whole bunch of compilations. I think we did 20 something CDs on Go Custom. Made
Wow.
some money at it, not a lot. With the bands, I would do a deal where I would give them, I'd run 1,000, 2,000. I'd give them half the run that they could sell at their shows. I just give
Mm-hmm.
it to them. Here you go, as their payment. They
Mm-hmm.
could sell the CDs for $5 to $10 each. So you figure 500 times 10, $5,000 they can make off those if they wanted to. And
Right.
then I would take the others and sell them online or through my distributor. And it did pretty good for a while. And then CDs died. I
Right.
mean, everything just went to shit probably around 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Our label was Go Custom was being distributed through Red Eye Distribution,
Mm-hmm.
and they stopped making payments. And I was like, "What's going on?" And they said, we're going under.
Right.
And I talked to other labels. They said the same thing. And so I had to reevaluate. And at that time, I was kind of getting more into doing film. I wanted to do a feature movie. So I just kind of like slowly let the label kind of wind down, and then started working on film.
And that's a great segue. So let's talk about your film stuff. Um,
Well, what I did is oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say continue. So.
Oh, continue. The first I decided I'd always want to make movies. I used to use a lot of movie samples and Kill Switch Klick stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of realized I was a frustrated filmmaker. And I thought, okay, let me see what I can do. And I went down to Seattle Cable Access Network, which was Scan TV, is a public access station in Seattle, and took the classes, learned how to film there, signed up to make a TV show to teach myself how to film. And then I started going out and filming bands, filming interviews with people, and did a weekly television show on public access for 4 years, which was really hard because you have to come up with a half an hour original. You can't run reruns, but a certain percentage of your shows. And I was constantly editing, and it taught me how to edit, how to film. And at the end of probably about 3 years, the last year that I was doing the TV show, I started filming Hot Rod Girls Save the World, which was my first feature film. It's kind of like a David Lynch style hot rod movie. It made its money back. We put it out on DVD. It got into a couple of film festivals. Currently, it's on Shout Factory TV. You can watch it for free on there. It was on Amazon for a long time, but you have to rent it on Amazon and some other platforms. But yeah, I have a distributor, One World Distribution. They distribute it for me. And then I made a second film, Rat Rod Rockers, which was kind of like a prequel to Hot Rod Girls Save the World. And then I just kind of like, okay, now what am I doing? So both the films did okay, but it wasn't like, okay, I'm not going to be like, David Lynch at this point. It was
Right.
just not happening. So I kind of went back to doing the TV show a little bit and filming. Like now I'm working on videos and have a new music project. But, it was kind of like the stuff that I learned from filming was invaluable. And making a feature-length movie, it took me 4 years to make Hot Rod Girls Save the World, about 2.5 years to make Rat Rod Rockers. And for me, that was just like, it was better than going to any school. As far as what I learned how to do field recording and filming and directing, all just kind of hands-on as I was doing it. So, and troubleshooting issues. So yeah, it was really, really a good thing for me, I think.
That's cool. Are you doing film stuff now?
That's where I'm at now.
That's what you're working on right now?
I'm working on music videos. I'm doing the thing is, Hot Rod Girls Save the World and Rat Rod Rockers were both shot in standard definition. And the reason was I had bought this kick-ass Panasonic camera in early 2000, about 2002. It was about $3,000 camera. But back then, all of the cameras were standard def. High def really didn't even exist.
Right.
So it was like Hot Rod Girls and Rat Rod Rockers were filmed on standard definition video, which is what DVDs are. DVDs are standard def. And so it was like, it kind of put me in a position where I was like, I really want to do some high def stuff. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I invested in higher quality cameras. And most recently, I got a Panasonic Lumix GH5, which is a 4K camera and a bunch of other 4K stuff. And I'm planning on getting a couple of music videos out here hopefully in the next year. But I had a bunch of life things that happened the last 2 years. So it kind of put me in a situation where I'm just now getting caught back up to about 3 years ago. Plus COVID. COVID really just body slammed any projects that I was doing. It really body slammed. Yeah. I mean, when it started, I was working this kick-ass job and starting to set up stuff to shoot these music videos, had all the equipment set, and nobody would show up because they didn't want to get COVID. So I had to cancel all these shoots, and I just eventually just gave up. And here we are 3 years later, and I'm starting to gear it up again. But
yeah, that's not uncommon.
Yeah, it was rough. The last couple of years have been really rough.
It's
yeah, for everybody.
All of my friends that do like booking bands and whatnot, they're still having people cancel.
Right.
They're like, oh, one of our band members has COVID or may have been exposed, and like, okay, well, got to shut down the entire show.
Yep. It's not over.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and it's not over. And for me, my mom just passed away in February, and the reason I came down here to Southern California was because she was sick. She had problems breathing, so I came down here, kind of put everything on hold, and came here. And 3 weeks later, a friend of hers came over, and she got COVID from them, and she died.
Oh,
a couple, probably 5 days later, 6 days later.
Wow, that's
And
tough.
which I'm glad I got to spend the last 3 weeks with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I got to spend the last 3 weeks with her, but like since February, I'm down here like going through all her stuff, and we got rid of tons. She had so much stuff. That woman, she was a hoarder. She collected cool stuff, like little knickknacks and stuff. But I mean, what do you do with knickknacks? Your mom's knickknacks. So my
Mm-hmm.
sister took some stuff, and my niece took some stuff, and and the rest of the stuff. It's been like a couple months of like giving things away and all that. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
never really thought when COVID started, I had no idea that my mom would be one of those, that actually died from it. So
oh man, condolences, but
it's pretty hard.
yeah, that's
Thank you.
really
Thank you.
tough. My parents don't tend to have much in terms of collections, so at least I've got that to. I don't have to worry about that so much.
Look forward to,
Yeah,
I guess.
I almost said look forward to.
No, it's a hard process.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I look at some people
it's
who, like my upstairs neighbors, for example, who they're going to see this, but they have like who knows how many decades of just shit, I mean, it's not shit. I'm sorry, just a lot of stuff,
yeah,
And I think like,
yeah,
wow, that's, every 4 or 5 years, I tend to get rid of everything and start over. Like that's my MO.
yeah.
But if I didn't, I'd be in the same
Minimal
boat.
is better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I just moved into a new place and literally bought everything brand new, like everything. Like I got rid of everything and started over.
That's good.
It's expensive, but at least I'm not carrying what I like to think of as baggage around with me.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And it kind of, when you kind of purge that way too, and you kind of get rid of stuff you really don't need or are ever going to use. And that's kind of, I think that's a good way to live, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do wake up fairly frequently and say, oh, where is, whatever, an album or a book or whatever. And it's not there. And there's that brief moment where I'm really sad and then it's gone,
Yeah.
So at least, again, I don't have to carry a bunch of shit around with me.
That's best.
Yeah, exactly. So I got way ahead of myself. I want to talk about the name of the band of Kill Switch Klick.
Okay.
Because I think it's a fascinating
Okay.
story. All right.
Yeah.
So you're working at Microsoft.
Yeah.
You're a landscaper. Is that what you were doing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a yard ape.
Nice. And that's about the same time I was at Microsoft too. So I think that's pretty funny. So you're out there, you're mowing the lawn, and you take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we worked on these huge mowers that had 3 big blades on them. They're called walk behinds.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working on this one, and it was an older one, and it kept sputtering and coughing and dying. And I have to restart it, and finally it was about ready to totally go. And I was trying to think of a band name. All these ideas, and nothing was working. I had like Concussion and all these weird kind of stupid names. And in my head, I thought I should hit the kill switch, because kill switch is how you shut off a mower.
Mm-hmm.
They have a pull start and a switch that you turn off. It's called the kill switch.
Mm-hmm.
And how you're kind of thinking things as you're doing. I'm like, kill switch. Oh my God, that would be a perfect name for my band.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the thing was, I thought, okay, well, kill switch is a common term. Somebody might have taken it. Maybe I want something else to it. And I just kept thinking about it all day long. I finally got the motor run better, still working. And that was at the same time that Jeffrey Dahmer had been arrested for eating all those people and doing his stuff. And I started thinking about Jeffrey Dahmer and other mass murderers and serial killers and stuff. And I thought, I wonder if they had like a kill switch that went click. That was just my my idea. As phrases were rolling around. And so I grabbed the word click and I thought, Kill Switch Klick, that's cool. And so that became, I spelled click with a K just because, everything's got to be a K in industrial. And KSK, that became the name. Later, I did an internet search and stuff back then, and there was no kill switches or anybody else. So I thought, okay, cool, we're good. We put out some albums. Later, I found a band in Montana or something that was called Kill Switch, but they were a couple years after us. And then you want me to lead into the Kill Switch Engage thing?
Yeah, Kill Switch Engage and William Gibson. Let's do that.
Yeah, yeah. So years later, we put out our third album. It was probably 1997. That was the Degenerate album, and William Gibson is one of my all-time favorite writers. So is Bruce Sterling. Love those guys. They pretty much invented cyberpunk and were major proponents of the whole steampunk movement. Anyhow, William Gibson. I was working a day job at the University Bookstore in University District, and William Gibson was there doing a book signing, and I actually talked to the gal who put all the book signings together. I knew her; she was a super cool lady. I said, "Hey, is there any way that you can like let me meet William Gibson like when he's done doing his read?" And she's like, "Yeah, for sure."
Nice.
And so right when he was done or getting ready to be done, she called me down at my station because I was a receiving manager, and said, "Hey, I'm gonna get him by the back steps. You come up and meet him." And what I had done is I had taken one of my CDs and signed it, not to be, narcissistic or whatever. It was like because he was an influence, and I had put "Thank you for the influence." His lyrics and everything had influenced my lyric, or not lyrics. His books had influenced my lyrics, and so I'm thinking, I just wanted to let him know, and give him something physical. So I signed the CD and told him, I was going to tell him thank you. Walked up, shook his hand, super super nice guy, super quiet, and gave him the CD. And I said, I want to thank you for all the influences. Your writing is amazing. It's inspired my lyrics and everything else. And he looked at the cover, which was me with this virtual reality helmet on, screaming. He says, "Yeah, I can see my influence."
Love it.
And I thought, oh, that's cool. And so we talked a little bit longer, and then that was that. So I was like, oh, that's cool, great. So about 6 months later, my friend, who was a huge X-Files fanatic, he comes running into work. He's like at the University Bookstore. He's like, "Your X-Files episode was on last night." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Your X-Files episode." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because I never watched the show, once in a while. And he's like, "William Gibson." I'm like, "Yeah." "Wrote an episode of the X-Files." I'm like, "Yeah." "And I know you gave him a CD." And I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Guess what it's called?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "It's called Kill Switch." I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's cool." And he said, "It's about a CD that has a virus on it to kill this artificial intelligence." I'm like, "Whoa,
That's awesome.
so weird." It's kind of like that. Like maybe if he was thinking about the idea of like writing this episode of the X-Files, me handing him that CD inspired him in some way. So fast forward another year or so, and this band called Deceptor, or whatever they were called at the time, huge X-Files fanatics, see that episode, and they're like, "Oh, we got to change our name to Kill Switch," and that was
That's
Kill
awesome.
Switch Engage. So so me handing the CD to William Gibson, inspired them to name their band Kill Switch Engage, which is kind of weird. My drummer was like, "Hey, we should sue him," and I'm like, "Ah, that sounds like sour grapes, man. I'm not going to go there." It's cool that was just the progression of it. You know what I mean? It's like this flow of creative ideas.
Well,
So,
here's something funny.
So that's how that happened, and they went on to win Grammys. And
I was going to say, when I first heard of Kill Switch Engage, just briefly in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wonder if that's a continuation of Kill Switch Klick. But then I heard them and went, obviously it's not.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, not totally different style of music. Yeah, but yeah, no, it was cool. It made me feel like when I realized the thread of continuity, it made me feel really good. I thought it was kind of a cool thing, and like how the world works and inspiration.
It's one of those like it's kismet, right? It's one of those like chance meeting that ends up spawning something much larger.
Yep. No, exactly, and that's cool. I'm all for that.
Have you talked to, or did you talk to William Gibson after that ever?
No, I did not. I had mentioned to some people about it, and a friend of mine who had done some updates at one point on Wikipedia. So he had adjusted the Wikipedia pages, which was funny because they basically Kill Switch Engage had already said that they were inspired by it. That's how they got their name. So it was just a matter of him adding in the how Gibson got the idea. In the meeting between us. So it was kind of cool. But,
well, and to imagine William Gibson sitting there.
So, yeah, it was kind of
cool to imagine
thing.
William Gibson sitting there listening to a Kill Switch Klick CD is kind of a cool thought, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's like his whole, I mean, Neuromancer, which is like his big first novel, was just had such an impact on me as far as like just like, wow, this is just the idea of like computers and internet and virtual reality
Definitely.
and all that stuff, which he was really like one of the main guys that really brought that forward.
Hmm.
That gave me a lot of like, where is this going with technology, and gave me tons of fuel for my own work. So yeah, it was just cool just knowing that he has that, and he may have thrown it away, who knows, but if it gave him the inspiration for the title of an episode of the X-Files, that's good too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Um, I've got two things to say. Well, not about that, but kind of. One, I actually had one
yeah,
of your, I think it was a 3-song
good.
demo. Was it 3? Yeah, I think it was 3 songs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, oh fuck, now I can't remember. I think it was Celebrate the Misery was on it. I know that. Anyway, 2 other songs, probably decanonized and whatever. So I had that for years, just like, sitting in a drawer somewhere. Because I listened to it until it basically had almost fallen apart.
Cool.
But at some point,
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys did it or if other people did it. The click, sometimes it was spelled CK and sometimes just with a K. Was that you, or was that just?
no, I always spelled it
Oh, okay,
Klick.
okay,
I always spelled it
okay,
Klick, but there's been misspelling. Some people spelled it with a C at the beginning. Other people took the
right.
C out at the end when they were writing reviews, or some people did dubs of tapes and stuff like that too, which is not. Back then, it was more acceptable because you wanted people to like bootleg your
Right.
tapes, so that because that's how you did things. You wanted people to hear you. So
So I wish I still had that tape, because I have no idea if it was actually from you guys or if it was somebody
yeah,
had dubbed it and reprinted a cover. Like, I have no idea. you know. um,
it could have been. Well, that's funny you mentioned it, because that's why I decided to do cassettes again.
yeah,
This is the new project.
excellent.
Shameless self promotion. Sci-Fi Republic. I saw one of those tapes, one of the early Kill Switch Klick tapes on eBay for
Wow.
like $40, and I was like, "Whoa, okay, that's cool." When it's original Kill Switch Klick, I'm like, "Who is this person?" And before I could even bid on it, it was
Oh
gone,
man.
because I don't even have a copy of those anymore. And I started really thinking about. I heard about there's a cassette company in England called Sacred Tapes, and they only release cassette tapes of ambient type bands, electronic bands. And the reasoning is because it's a physical thing. Obviously, all their stuff is also online, right? But they wanted to do cassettes instead of albums because cassettes have a weird sound. They have a lot of hiss, but extreme bottom end, low end. They're actually better than anything for low end. And when I saw that they were selling that, my one of my old tapes for that money, meaning it still worked, I thought, I should put something out on
Yeah.
cassette again. So that's why I decided with Sci-Fi Republic, we were actually working on a cassette for that. So I went out and bought a cassette deck. Had to find, I got this in the background. It's a Tascam. Spent $600 for a brand new, like 1995 style cassette deck, dubbing deck, and we're actually going to release the new album's
Oh,
going to be
that's
out on
awesome.
cassette.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I
So
think I bought
yeah,
that,
yeah.
the original Kill Switch Klick one. I forget what it was called, but anyway, that one and Anti-Swept Destroy Existence at the same time. And I think I bought them both just randomly. I don't think I'd heard either of you guys at that point. That was back when you would just buy albums because they look cool. Okay, here we go.
Yep, exactly. No, and that you're like, oh, this is interesting. Let's get this.
And I thought I bought Antichrist
I
Web
did that a
because
lot.
I was like, oh, death metal, right? I mean, it looked like death metal, and I'm really into that shit. So it's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
I was listening to it, and I was like, I don't know how to classify this shit. Like, honestly, it's like really hard to classify.
They call it grindcore because of the drum machines, but Robert is definitely a metal guitar player. And he actually has severe chops. He's really good. He's really fast. But he didn't like working with bands. He liked to do it all himself. So it led him to like programming everything himself.
Yeah, that's
they were fun to work with. They had some really cool musical ideas.
Definitely. And I was talking to one of them, and I can remember which one on MySpace. So quite some time ago. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? They're like, oh, we haven't done any music in a long time. I was like, well, you should. And then I lost track of them. So
definitely.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm friends with him on Facebook. I mean, you can always look him up there too, Robert. Robert
Okay,
and Chris are
cool.
both on Facebook.
Cool. Yeah, I think whoever I was talking to had moved to
I talk to Chris
Texas or
every once in a
something.
while.
I forget. Like there was some weird story behind it.
I think Chris is in. It might be Robert. I know Chris is in. I think Middle
Okay,
California
cool.
somewhere. I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to get a
So
hold of
yeah.
those guys just to because it would be fun to talk to.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
Definitely.
Da, what's next for you, man? I mean, obviously you're doing your cassette thing.
Right now we're doing the Sci-Fi Republic is the new project. I wanted to do something. I mean, I was, you kind of go back and you listen to your roots and you think
Hmm.
about what you've done. With the DA Sebastian and the Inner Demons thing that I did a few years, well, it was more than that. It was back in the early 2000s. I was kind of going back to my spy, like crime jazz and Dick Dale and the Deltones kind
Hmm.
of stuff, Henry Mancini stuff, kind of exploring that part of my history, why I got into music. And recently, I was talking to all these artists and the whole synth wave and dark wave and all this stuff that's coming up right now. I started getting excited about it. I thought, this is a lot like what was going on in the '80s. I mean, it is. I mean, synthwave bands try to
Hmm.
sound like stuff from the '80s. So I thought, I want to kind of go back to Gary Newman, David Bowie, some of my very earliest influences, especially
Hmm.
Gary Newman. And I'm really glad he's on tour right now. He's actually he's been touring all around the world and stuff. I was lucky enough to remix one of his songs for Cleopatra Records
Nice.
release, and after seeing him on Saturday Night Live in 1981, and actually him being an inspiration for me to get into, I mean, getting really serious about being a musician, and then like what is it, 12 years later,
Hmm.
whenever that was, in the mid 90s, getting a DAT tape with his raw vocals on it,
That's
and
cool.
getting to remix and write music underneath what he was, his vocals was really, it was a big deal for me. I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. And I think now what I really want to kind of go back to that. I mean, I'm getting close to 60. I'm 58 years old, and I'm thinking, there's times when I think, why am I even doing this anymore? But at the same time, it's like,
Hmm.
it's what I do. You know what I mean? I make a little bit of money here and there from, royalties and
Hmm.
stuff, not enough at this point to live on. But, it's what the thing we're doing right now with Sci-Fi Republic is kind of going back to that kind of early '80s synth thing, Eurythmics and Gary Newman, early Gary Newman, a little bit of
Hmm.
Joy Division, and early New Order kind of thrown in there too. And that's kind of where the post punk thing and the Gary Newman thing was really where my beginning of serious music
Hmm.
love came from. So that's kind of what I'm really getting into right now. I want to see what I can do with this new project, and we'll see.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm supposed to.
Making space
Oh,
helmets.
well, let's see those. Nice.
Space helmets. This is a space helmet. I made these props. It has a
Hmm.
bubble that goes on the top. I made these for. I like to make props and stuff for my
Hmm.
productions. So I made these, and then we did super good. Okay, this is a laser gun thing that I
Oh,
made.
I love that.
So look what I made. It's yeah. So I basically took these. So these we've used these for a lot of the photo shoots, but we're going to use these in the
That's
music
great.
videos too. So, but hopefully this fall we're going to finish up the 2 music
And
videos.
their
Yeah.
music.
So, and we got a new song coming out next week. Yeah. Well, right now I have a new single coming out called "Downtime" for
Hmm.
Sci-Fi Republic. That'll be out I think next week. Um, and then we're planning on doing 2 different music videos for 2 different songs. One's going to be a slightly animated one, and the other one's going to be just kind of bombastic,
I love it.
weird stuff.
I
So
love it.
we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, we can get them
Are
done by
you
the end
doing
of the year.
videos for other bands or just for your own right now?
No, I just want to do it for my own right now. The big thing is to get something out that's
Hmm.
high quality 4K and that shows what I can do, and it's just the creative
Right.
aspect is what I like to do. I really
Hmm.
like to create stuff, and I really want to see what I can do with video. But like I said, this last with COVID, which kind of destroyed the last 3 years, and then my mom's passing early this year, it kind of put me in a lurch. But hopefully by the end of this year, I'll be back up. I mean, I got
Hmm.
music coming out, but the videos I've got to get back up to Seattle to
Well,
actually
let me
film.
know when you
So
can get back up to Seattle. It would be interesting. We can grab some coffee or Chinese food or whatever.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
okay, I'm going to end this
yeah,
with 2 questions.
definitely,
All right.
definitely.
And I do this even with non-musical guests.
Okay.
First question is one that nobody likes. This is why I like to ask it,
Hmm.
because I can't answer this question.
Okay. Okay.
When you feel
Okay.
the need to have something to spawn your creativity, what do you listen to? Mm-hmm.
What music? Well, it's like I'm always exploring.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always finding new stuff. I just went through a huge dream pop phase. I was listening to like, I'll find these bands and I'm like, what the fuck
Mm-hmm.
is this genre? I've never heard of dream pop. I mean, I knew that it was started with now
Right.
historically it's the Cocteau Twins. They say started a lot of it, and then a lot of the shoegaze stuff. But like 2 years ago, I was like in this huge dream pop phase. Listening to Tame Impala and all these weird bands that are just
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, what the hell is going on here? And Beach House and uh, I go through phases where I like to explore more than anything. If I find a new genre or subgenre or something that's just like bands I've never heard of or young bands that are kind of going back and doing something. I went through a psychedelic, neo psychedelic thing with like
Mm-hmm.
the Black Angels. I heard them a lot of times. I'll hear stuff in films. I heard Black Angels at the end of True
Mm-hmm.
Detective season one. The very end, as the credits are rolling, I hear this band, and I'm like, "This is weird. It's like the Velvet Underground, but
Right.
newer." So I went and looked them up, and I'm like, "Oh fuck, I got to check these guys out." And then I'm like looking at all the other bands, and you know, just weird. Like Left Lane Cruiser, I discovered them. They're like a blues, two-piece blues band, like
Oh,
White
interesting.
Stripes that does blues. Pack AD is a two-piece band. It's two girls that do. Um, they're kind of like, I can't explain those guys or gals. They're kind of like the White Stripes, but with
Mm-hmm.
like two girls and like doing kind of Judas Priest stuff and
Wow.
bands like Wuhan and Fuzz and even Caius. A friend of mine's like, you should check those guys out. They do high desert rock, and I'm like, what the
Right.
fuck is high desert rock? And I'm
Stoner
like,
rock.
okay, so I guess there is this thing. You know what I mean? It's like, why not? Exactly, exactly. It's the same thing. But and the other thing right now is I'm really inspirational wise getting
Mm-hmm.
into guitar pedals. I play bass. I mean, I play a extended bass and keyboards, obviously, and
Mm-hmm.
other and programming and stuff. But I'll hear a sound like on one of those albums. I'm like, okay, how did that guy get that sound on his guitar? So I'll go out and look at all these different boutique guitar pedal stores and find something and spend
Right.
$300 on something I shouldn't have buy, but then it like inspires me to do more stuff and so basically it's like the whole looking
Mm-hmm.
for stuff that inspires me when I find something, some weird little tidbit, that's under a rock somewhere, a band that maybe not that many people have heard. Dead Texan,
Mm-hmm.
that was another band I heard, an ambient band. Daru, that was another band I really love. They're a French band that do this really lo-fi ambient stuff. I hear these bands and I'm like, oh wow, nothing on the radio. I mean, very seldom will I ever hear anything
Mm-hmm.
unless it's a college radio station. But and that's why I really like Spotify as far as like when you have a radio station and they throw something, you're like, what the hell is this? But it perks your interest, through the radio
Mm-hmm.
station algorithms, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's the inspiration of finding something that's different that I haven't heard before or a subgenre that I didn't even know
Yeah,
existed. And there's a lot
without
of
a
them.
doubt. And by the
It's
way,
a big
that was
world.
by far the most thorough answer to that question I've ever gotten.
Yeah.
So kudos.
I'm,
I
I'm
love,
an amateur
yeah,
musicologist. I love
a lot
music.
of people just say,
So
I don't
yeah,
know, kind of shake, shrug their shoulders and whatever. Um,
yeah,
to be
yeah,
honest,
yeah,
my answer to that question
yeah,
is it fucking depends. That's my answer. um, it could be anything
yeah,
from,
yeah.
you know, some
Oh yeah. I
obscure
mean, yeah,
Scandinavian death metal band to, the Beatles. I mean, it really just depends on my mood.
oh yeah,
Um, all
yeah.
right, one last question for you. This one's
Yeah.
fun. What is
Okay.
something about D.A. Sebastian that
Okay.
nobody or very few people would know? A hidden
Hmm.
talent?
I don't know. I'm pretty open. I talk about no my like my ex-wife said, you have no filter. You have no filter. Um, it's like I just talk. Something I guess I had a early on, even with
Hmm.
Kill Switch Klick, I had severe stage fright. Later, when the band was going full bore, I
Hmm.
did all Kill Switch Klick sober, which was hard because had just gotten over some anxiety and getting my shit together and getting sober. And I remember we played a show at the Vogue, and there was a record label guy that was going to be there, and I was
Hmm.
so scared shitless. I mean, we were across the
Frontier
street
room,
at some bar, and because I don't drink alcohol, I was
right?
drinking tons of water and going piss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the Frontier. Yeah, yeah. And when I drank tons and tons of water and was pissing like every 10 seconds, and I was just scared shitless. And later, I mean, few people really knew how how hard
Hmm.
that was for me to deal with that. But once I got past a certain point, I just said, okay, I got to do this. But yeah, and I had some real shy moments in my life, and I kind of, I think when I got over I was bullied when we moved from Waynesburg,
Hmm.
Pennsylvania, when I was a little kid. Even though I was a tall kid, we moved to San Bernardino, California, and I just stuck out like a
Hmm.
really ugly sore thumb. My clothes were wrong, everything was wrong because at that point, East Coast and
Right.
West Coast were two different worlds. And I talked funny because I was from Pennsylvania, and so I got bullied a lot. And later, when I got into junior high school, I said, "Fuck this! I'm
Hmm.
going to make a turnaround." And I started really challenging people who would say shit. And by the time I hit high school, I actually went back and attacked a few of the bullies that had bullied me in elementary school. And not that that was a good thing, but it's that whole and punk rock is what gave me that. It's like punk was like, fuck, I'm gonna cut my
Right.
hair, I'm gonna get in fights. And I did. I got in a lot of fights. But to the point that I'm trying to make is it was that energy, that punk rock energy that I
Hmm.
used to get over my stage fright. But yeah, that's probably the one thing I don't talk about a lot, and few people really know. A lot of
Hmm.
people think I'm pretty gregarious and outgoing,
Hmm.
and normally I am. But with Kill Switch Click, at first it was very
Well, look,
difficult.
you're not alone in that. Like almost every band that I've talked to, especially lead singers,
Yeah,
so many of them are, alcoholics or druggies or whatnot
yeah,
because of that, because they can't, you know, there's a disconnect between
right,
their
exactly.
vision of themselves being on stage and actually being on stage. And in order to deal with that, drugs and alcohol, I'm like,
Yeah,
sure,
yep.
because when you're high, you can do anything, or at least you think you can.
Creates the
Exactly.
mask. Yeah, and you create you create that mask, and it becomes that thing, And well, it's like the guy who just died from Foo
Mhm.
Fighters. They were saying that he was having
Yeah.
problems with stage fright towards the end. And Chris Cornell, I don't know what the situation was with him, but I actually did his. I was working for a company.
Yeah, of
I don't know
course.
if we have time for a quick story, but uh, I I was working at a video transfer and editing company. I was doing film and video editing, and a gal comes in and she says she has a bunch of tapes she wants to transfer. And I said, "Cool." And I gave her some decks because they're old style decks. And she was previewing her tapes. She was all ready to go. I was writing up her order, and I said, "What's the name?" And she says, "Susie
So
Cornell."
Susan,
And I go, "Oh, like
Susan
Chris
Silverman,
Cornell?" She
right?
goes, "Yeah, that's my brother." I'm like, "Whoa!" And this is like 6 months, 6 months after. Right.
Susan Silver,
What's
right?
that? What's that?
Yeah,
Susan
right.
Silverman was his wife. Is
Oh,
his
I
wife.
got it.
His
I'm sorry.
sister,
Yeah.
Susie Cornell. And yeah, and so she brought yeah, it was his sister. And I said, "I'm really sorry." She said, "It's okay." He was pretty upset and stuff, and that's all she said about it. So I went in. I was doing his tape transfers, and of course we have to
Hmm.
monitor these things as we're doing them. And he's the same age as me. He was on some of the same
Hmm.
medications I was for anxiety and stuff, from what the autopsies and stuff said that I read. And I never was a really big Soundgarden fan, but I do
Hmm.
respect them, and I think he was an amazing singer. Um, but watching these videos, with him, in the hot tub with his kid
Oh
and like
man.
running around and going to weddings, and it's just like you're like, fuck, what is
Hmm.
going on with this? Why is this guy, who had everything, that a lot of us musicians,
Hmm.
aspiring musicians, wanted, like basically pay the bills and everything by, by doing your music,
Yeah.
and he just like, okay, I'm going to kill myself, and I mean, I understand depression can get out of
Hmm.
control, and I've been on to the edge of that many times, but it just, to me, it was just it really just made me feel like, wow, man,
Yep.
there are no guarantees, and um, like I said, seeing those home movies and the DVDs that I was making for were going to her daughter, to his daughter, sorry, to her niece, Susie Cornell's niece, and by the way, she was super sweet, super nice lady. I mean, just really cool. And it just was heartbreaking. You see this and you're just like, why, what is going on with these guys to get, it makes you think of Robin Williams and Bourdain and all these other people who seem to have everything, and everything that people like me who are aspiring, who are creative, that would like to do it 24/7 want, and they throw it away. And to me, it's just like, yeah. So I guess you have to live your life as you have it, as you see it, and day by day.
I mean, my theory about that is that those people who are there, like, first of all, depression and let's just be honest, bipolarism tends to be rampant in the music industry, right? And I think what happens is people get to that point where they do have everything, and then they realize they're still sad, they're still depressed, and so then what's the point? But if you're still struggling, there's still something to look forward to, Right. At least that's my theory.
Right. And that's, you're hitting on the key point. Yeah, that's a key point. Yeah. And I think that's the key point, is like when you're struggling to get where you want, you're hungry, that gives you a purpose. And I think maybe, I have no idea what was going through his head. Maybe he's thinking back to the good old days in Seattle or something, I don't know. But it just really blows me away that people in those positions do that. But
absolutely not.
You don't know what pain they're going through.
Depression has no face. Like you really can't tell.
Right. Exactly.
Hey, DA, this is awesome, man. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to ask you to stay on just for a second once I stop recording. But
thank you. Cool.
Thank you so much. I'm going to kill this right now.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool.